The Labour leader, Jeremy Corbyn, is attending a Stop the War coalition dinner tonight, in spite of pressure from his own MPs to boycott the event because of the group's stance on Syria. And joining us now from the dinner is John Rees. He's the national officer for the Stop the War coalition, and he's at that event in South London. Thank you for being with us, Mr. Rees. As you know, some Labour MPs have been saying that Jeremy Corbyn shouldn't go to the dinner. Are you absolutely sure he's going to turn up?
Yes, it's absolutely the right thing for him to do. And isn't it amazing that some of the Labour MPs who are saying this are the very same people who attended with 40 other MPs an arms corporation dinner that was £250 a plate just this year. Some of the biggest critics of Jeremy Corbyn, John Woodcock, Margaret Beckett, Vernon Croker, they went to this arms corporation's Beano, and they're turning around and saying to Jeremy Corbyn that he shouldn't come to a Stop the War dinner. Well, if they're going to a Start the War dinner, why shouldn't he come to a Stop the War dinner?
Well, I think their point is that he's leader of the Labour Party, and many of the people in Stop the War are affiliated to other parties. I mean, you yourself used to be a member of the Socialist Workers' Party, and therefore they see that as not being loyal to the party he leads.
Well, yes, it's a cross-party organisation, like CND, like the Countryside Alliance was. Of course, there are people who've spoken on our platforms like Peter Oborne, the former chief correspondent of the Daily Telegraph. There are members of the Labour Party, there are members of the Green Party, there are members of a great many organisations, including the trade unions and a vast variety of religious organisations as well. So, of course, it isn't going to be loyal to one party. It is a single-issue campaign.
But it is true that the leadership has been associated with parties, by and large, on the extreme left, and that Mr. Corbyn is now leader of the Labour Party, and they would argue that he has a different responsibility now than perhaps he had when he was an MP regularly voting against party policy.
Well, I'm sure, Adam, numerically, actually, the largest section of any particular party that are members of the Stop the War coalition are members of the Labour Party simply by dint of its size. But no, I understand why the establishment don't like this. They don't like a left-wing leader of the Labour Party. They don't like the anti-war movement, and they don't like, in particular, the connection between the two. But I'm very sorry, as Peter Oborne, who I mentioned earlier, has pointed out, we called the last 14 years of foreign policy right, about Afghanistan, about Iraq, about Libya, when the political establishment in this country called it wrong. And I think that Jeremy recognises that. He was part of that from the very beginning, and this is absolutely the right place for him to be.
And do you believe that the Labour Party is now coming into line with what you believe?
Well, as we know, in the Syria vote, a majority of the Cabinet, a majority of the MPs and a majority of the members of the Labour Party all agreed with the Stop the War position on this. The people who are pro-war in the Labour Party are a minority, even in the Parliamentary Labour Party, which is the part of the party that's most hostile to Jeremy Corbyn. So I think really they should, take a step back, take a deep breath and consider whether really they're either saying the right thing or in the right party.
We've been given some remarks that Jeremy Corbyn is going to make tonight, and he's going to say that branding Stop the War as somehow illegitimate is an attempt to close down democratic debate and campaigning. Who is branding Stop the War as somehow illegitimate?
Well, I think that was the gist of Tristram Hunt's remarks. I've just done a series of media discussions with Emma Reynolds, the Labour MP. She seemed to be pretty much saying that. Jess Phillips seemed to be pretty much saying that.
I disagree with you, but I don't think anyone in this democracy is saying you haven't got a right to say what you say, are they?
Well, I think that Tristram Hunt was pretty much saying that. And if you're saying that the Labour leader shouldn't associate with us, then you are saying really that these are people's views that are, as I think he's put it, disreputable, didn't he?
Do you believe, to quote that article which you put up on your website and then took down, that Paris reaped the whirlwind of Western policy in the Middle East?
No, I don't, and that's why we took it down. We took it down for this reason, actually, Adam, because that headline, in an unqualified way, made it sound as if completely innocent victims of a terrible terrorist attack were in some way responsible. And of course, we don't believe that for a minute. But that shouldn't be taken to mean that we can't have a debate about whether Western governments and their persistent military intervention in the Middle East have created the conditions for the growth of terrorist organisations. And that's an important point of view that ought to be represented. Let me give you one fact. We've already been, of course, the Western powers have already been bombing Syria for 15 months. In just the first month that the Americans were bombing Syria, 6,000 people joined the Islamic State. And our case has always been that the so-called war on terror doesn't defeat terrorism, it doesn't solve the problem of terrorism, it creates it.
And what would you do to stop ISIS raping underage girls, killing homosexuals, beheading hostages, and extracting ransoms from the populations it occupied?
Well, first of all, I would break off diplomatic relations with the Saudi Arabian state, which does exactly all those things, but which we send enormous amounts of arms to, because their Wahhabist ideology informs the Islamic State. The prince's funds have funded the Islamic State, and they were one of the things which gave it an enormous boost in the first place. So I'd end the hypocrisy of saying that those things are very bad when the Islamic State does them, which they are, but we turned a blind eye to them, lower the Union Jack to half-mast when the head of the Saudi Arabian state dies. That's the first thing I do. The second thing I would say to the Turkish government, you are a NATO ally, you are supposed to be in this alliance against the Islamic State, but you are bombing the Kurds, who are the only people on the ground who are actually taking on the Islamic State. I would also say to the Turkish government, close your border and stop the 25% of Islamic State revenue which is made from selling oil on the black market and running it in tankers across your border. If we did these things, Adam, we'd be a lot further forward.
OK, thank you very much indeed for joining us. I see there's a red light. I thought it was a red carpet for a moment for Jeremy Corbyn. It's just a light, I see.
Oh, definitely a very red one.